Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy. So I am done doing dark deck interviews. I will probably keep that little deck interview that I came up with to do this. You know, tuck it away and take it out every now and then. But this is what I was doing to keep track of what decks, I was on a scale of 1 to 10, I was giving them a rating. And early on with my, what I call them, my control decks, these first 3 were my control decks. I discovered that the Osho Zen was actually pretty good. None of them got over, well, this one was an 8 to 9, the Heal Yourself cards. That was an 8 to 9. None of them really hit a 10, which is okay. I wasn't looking for perfection in dark decks or anything. And there were hitches in the set of questions, intentional hitches, to kind of test the scope of a deck, and that kind of thing. So it turns out that quite a few, so the Osho Zen throughout most of this until I hit the Lord of the Rings Oracle was pretty much the gold standard for dark decks. As I continue to do this. So I did find, one of my general reader kinds of a deck that really functioned quite well. This is a 7 to 8. I know you can't see it very well there. Functioned quite well as a dark deck. And my Tarot of Transformation did reasonably well with a 6 to 7. The Santa Muerte failed, but that doesn't mean that I will get rid of the Santa Muerte or that I will keep the Santa Muerte. I just know that it's not a dark deck, and that that if I keep it, it's on the basis of other merits. The Rackham Tarot, I was a little surprised that it was actually performed less well than the Rider-Waite-Smith Centennial, because the Rackham Tarot has a dark feel to me, and it did give me quite a dark reading back, what was it, in March or something, that I was working with the Rackham Tarot. But it just sort of flopped when I did this particular. So I decided that one I'm actually going to let go. The Hobbit Tarot did about the same as the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's definitely a deck with dark aspects to it, but I can't remember how it sort of fell apart, if it was just that the messages were kind of vague or what. I'm not going to get rid of the Hobbit Tarot because, I really have it primarily as a Tolkien fan. But it's not a dark deck, so I'm just crossing off the ones that don't qualify. Really, Rider-Waite-Smith up here didn't function as a dark deck. Can you get useful insights out of it? Sure, because of course it's a tarot deck, so you can, but it's, if I'm particularly trying to out myself regarding some dark or problematic aspects of my personality, then it might be better to find a different deck than a standard Rider-Waite-Smith. So next, this Santa Muerte is not the one everybody knows of. It's not the Lestrani. It's one published in Mexico, or by a Mexican publishing company. And it's really more of a romance deck to me. It's a very masculine deck, and it came out of 4, so it's not really a dark deck either. Regardless of the figure of death standing behind people or dark clouds, it just doesn't function that way. It just doesn't. The Dark Fairy Tale deck. Again, I complain about the images, but it did quite well. for the longest time here, it was the only one giving the Osho Zen a run for its money. So the Dark Fairy Tale survives. The Gothic Tarot, only a 5. And I got this as a dark deck or a Halloween deck, and as I was going back through it and looking at it, I realized it's going to be a really difficult deck for me to read. And I think that's the main reason that it got a 5, is because I just, much as I like the gargoyles, the Gothic Tarot is going to go. I'm going to give it away because I don't have the right feel for it to read it well. The Ghost Tarot did a middling job doing a dark reading, but again, this deck is really, to me, more of a either an everyday standard deck that can give you kind of some extra warnings, and has that ghostly Halloween-y feel to it. But I didn't think it would perform very well as a dark deck. To me, it's not that dark. It's more of an everyday, and it's an interesting deck for actually romantic readings, love readings. So this I'm keeping because I do like it for the love readings, but and it might be more my Halloween-y deck that I keep, since I'm not keeping the Gothic. And certainly, you know, the Santa Muerte might, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see with the Santa Muerte. The Ghosts and Spirits Tarot actually did better than I thought it would. I thought it would really not register above a 5, but it did. So, I mean, but nothing extraordinary. I think there were problems with it. So this deck I'm definitely keeping. I love it for the folklore, the international folklore, but it's not going to be a go-to dark deck. So thus far, what we have for go-to dark decks are Osho Zen, Tarot of Transformation, and the Dark Fairy Tale. So now we get to the Dark Mirror, and it is on the same par as the Dark Fairy Tale. So that has potential, and I'm going to leave it here. Plus, it has that specific grief-oriented aspect of it that I think I may need in the next 10 years, 20 years or so. And then the Lord of the Ring Oracle is just its own thing. It definitely hit the Osho Zen. I could probably even... It's just dark, okay? It's just dark. When you're coming up as Sauron and Gollum, yeah, that's pretty dark. So yeah, I could probably get rid of the Dark Mirror and the Dark Fairy Tale and just wrestle with the Lord of the Rings for the rest of my life. But that tells me that this, from the beginning, as much as I keep thinking that I need to find a good or the right dark deck, like for everyday purposes, as though I would use a dark deck for everyday anything. My life, thankfully, does not lend itself to a lot of dark readings. You know, do I have personality issues, as we've seen through the course of all of these deck interviews, things that are hitches in my personality that interfere with my progress in life? Well, clearly I do. If you were to watch all of these, some of them repeat, and you know, there are things that, but they're not, I don't know how to say it, you know, it's not massive, you know, they're not things for the most part that I need to focus and work on. They're just things I maybe need to be more aware of, particularly in a given situation. But then the Heal Yourself cards, with the information coming out in the guidebook, I felt was at least an 8, because this Lord of the Rings Oracle has some limitations just because it's metaphorical. You know, it's a metaphorical interpretation, whereas this deck actually provided in the guidebook some really interesting ways of looking at things. Yeah, that I just found useful and insightful. So this deck definitely was coming out there. The Fairy Ring. It was doing better than I thought, as long as I read reversals. If I read reversals, then it was really very interesting. And I maybe should have given it a 7 to 8. But I'm going to put a star there, so that's a dark deck. The Chicoli Tarot, well, you know, it can be used that way, but it didn't, at least in the deck interview, it doesn't compare to some of these others. So I'm keeping it for other reasons, but I'm taking it off of there. So what I decided, I had been wondering about the Osho Zen, whether I was going to keep it. And then it gave such a good dark deck reading, I thought, well, maybe I should keep it. What I did was I took the cards, and this is what I do when I want to have a deep think about something. I take things to bed. I took the guidebook and the cards to bed, and I read through them. And I just don't like the guidebook. There's something about the I don't know if it's the approach to life, the approach to psychology, something about it that doesn't sit right with me. It was easy to read though in terms of the issues coming up. But then when I wanted to kind of get deeper into it, the guidebook was making me go, what? What? And so I think I'm going to let that deck go. Even though it was the gold standard for a while here, especially since I've got some that are just about equal to it, I'm going to let the Osho Zen go. So I've got the Tarot of Transformation, which I gave it a 6 to a 7 because the messages are very soft. At least the ones I got for this particular reading, the messages are just very soft. They're not digging nearly as deep as the Lord of the Rings and the Heal Yourself cards, you know, like wrestling with really negative inner bogeys here with the Lord of the Rings, as opposed to the Heal Yourself cards, which does give that psychological aspect of things, and really so did the Fairy Ring. I was quite pleased with that one. The Dark Mirror and the Dark Fairy Tale. It's like, I'm going to keep the Dark Fairy Tale. What have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this one, I go to this one for things that I suspect have some psychological underpinnings. So it's almost like I need this deck and 1 or 2 of these decks. This deck, I'm automatically going to keep just because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. So it's a keeper. Tarot of Transformation, of course, has all kinds of other functions. Let me just put this one as one that kind of passed, and this one that passed. But these ones were really the best ones down here. So I might think about the Dark Mirror. have to take some time with the Dark Mirror and the Heal Yourself cards, getting to know them better, and see if I really should just let the Dark Mirror go and the Heal Yourself cards will be the deck of that kind. They are the two oracles right here. Well, these are all oracles, really. And I don't know. I'm just going to give the Dark Fairy Tale a chance, just based on the reading I got out of it this time around. I'm going to give it a chance, even though some of the imagery really annoys me in the way that it is depicting emotions. So I think I don't need any more dark decks. I think that's really, really clear. You know, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, a softer one, 6. And even if I just had these 3 right here, again, for as infrequently as I even ask that sort of a question or do that kind of exploration, I don't need 6 decks. It might be nice to have one that's gentler than the Lord of the Rings. And again, the Heal Yourself cards was doing a good job of explaining the psychological stuff. Yeah. And the Fairy Ring I would keep anyway, just because it's a fairy deck. And it's got a lot of, you know, different kinds of fairies. It's just got the fairy folklore going on big time in it. Great guidebook. So I would keep this anyway. So I might try this. I might come up with grief cards to talk about grief or overcoming grief, and ask it of each of these, because this one I would keep in this situation primarily because of that grief aspect. And so it needs to somehow outperform this deck in that grief aspect to really justify keeping it, I think. That's the way I'm thinking right now. And so if I let go of that, then I would have, I don't know, I would have some decks. I don't think I could use the Lord of the Rings Oracle for anything else. But again, I'm keeping it because of the Tolkien aspect. And then the Heal Yourself cards is kind of would only, well, I got that deck actually for as an oracle to pull extra cards in relationship readings. So I didn't get it specifically as a dark deck, but it suits that purpose. And again, it had another purpose in my collection anyway, and so does this, just being a fairy deck. So the only decks I would have then that were bought specifically for their dark aspect is the Dark Mirror and the Dark Fairy Tale. Those are the only 2 that I got specifically for, you know, the potential to be a quote-unquote dark deck. And then for Halloweeny type decks, I've got Ghosts and Spirits, and I've got the Ghost Tarot. Because even though I've scratched them out as dark decks in terms of dark psychological and, you know, analysis or unraveling sorts of things, they're still that, and potentially the Santa Muerte would be a great Halloweeny deck. So I feel like I've got my bases covered, and I'm letting go. I'm letting go of the Gothic Tarot and the Rackham Tarot and the Osho Zen as a result of all of this. And potentially the dark mirror, depending on how it does with a, I used this in the other, I don't know, playoff, a contest between the dark mirror and the Heal Yourself cards. And then I can potentially let the dark mirror go. I don't feel like strongly compelled to get rid of them, but I think it's important because I have been buying decks specifically for this purpose, even though, and I'm hardly using them. So why keep them if I'm not using them? I need to go and make room for other decks, go to other people who might appreciate them, and use them more. So there we go. And I think I've mulled that as much as I need to, and I'm amazed if anybody has stuck through as I do this kind of analysis of what worked and what didn't, and if there's anything else that's leaving my collection. But yeah, that's it. That's the end of my exploration of dark decks using the Dark Deck Interview, with the exception of the contest between the Heal Yourself cards and the Dark Mirror. So I will let you guys know, and I'll put it in the playlist as well when I do that. We'll see how that turns up. I'm going to have to come up with an appropriate spread for that, a grief spread. Let me write that down. I need to come up with a grief spread. Lordy, that is not something I especially want to do, but I will do it. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.